When you think of the best types in Pokemon, what comes to your mind? Probably some of the late game types like Dragon, Steel, and Fairy, right? Well, what if I told you that the Water type, one of the 3 basic types you get access to at the very beginning of every Pokemon game, is secretly one of the best types in the game? Which, man, I am so sorry to Grass type fans because I made a type history video about how bad Grass type is, how great Fire type is, and now how great Water type is. I swear I don't hate Grass types, I'm just trying to present you guys with some information. So let's discuss why Water type Pokemon are probably a lot better than you think. So for a quick overview of their attributes, Water is obviously one of the best defensive types, only being weak to Grass and Electric, and resists the very popular offensive types of Fire, Ice, Steel, and of course, itself, which has transformed it into an extremely popular Terra type in recent years. Offensively, the type doesn't look too special, being resisted by 3 types and hitting 3 types for super effective damage, but honestly, it's not too bad in that department either, as the types that resist it aren't too problematic. Other than resisting itself, that does kind of suck when you're literally the most common type in the entire game, but honestly, given how common Water is, while resisting itself could be seen as a bad thing in some scenarios, a lot of times it actually creates a massive positive feedback loop, where everybody has to carry a Water-type Pokemon in order to wall out your opponent's Water-type Pokemon. Because other than that, only Grass and Dragon resist it, both types that can easily be dealt with if you have Ice Beam, which, spoiler alert, most Water types get access to. So really, Water becomes even more valuable by being the only type that reliably checks Water. Water also hits 2 incredibly meta-relevant types for super effective damage, those being Fire and Ground. And then Rock is just an added bonus. It's not the most relevant type to beat, but hey, it's better than nothing. While Water doesn't have the benefit of being immune to any types or statuses, it does have the advantage of having its moves boosted by 50% in the rain, which is going to be a very big talking point in the second half of this video. And because of this unique attribute, it means that unlike a lot of types who only find success when they're built a certain type of way, Ice notably comes to mind as they pretty much have to be a fast glass cannon to be even remotely viable, Water is one of the few types where stat distribution isn't a death sentence. You can be a physical attacker, special attacker, a wall, almost any role works for a Water type, at least in today's meta. But we should start from square one. So looking back at Generation 1, Water types were pretty good right off the bat, as they had most of their tools from the very beginning. Most notably, they always had a really powerful attack in Hydro Pump, one of the few that's still strong enough to be relevant today, and the 95 base power attack Surf, which has a much more reliable 100% accuracy. This allowed basically every Water type to have a reliable stab option in Gen 1, as most Water types were built to be special attackers. Or they were Seeking. Hey, not everybody can be the MVP. Ironically, one Water type that became super relevant in the future, but wasn't amazing here, was Gyarados, as it specialized in physical attacking, but never had the moves to back it up. But Pokemon like Cloyster, Slowbro, and Starmie immediately made themselves known to the metagame. Starmie in particular has always been one of the most consistently good Water types, thanks to its high speed stat, decent special attack, and incredibly wide move pool that allows it to hit most relevant Pokemon for super effective damage. Cloyster has likewise been good for most of its history. In Gen 1, it could abuse one of the incredibly broken trapping moves with Clamp, and it has since been reinvented as a user of multi-hit attacks with Skill Link and Shell Smash. Funnily enough, this Pokemon was also recently banned from Generation 5 OU. That's how good Cloyster was at its peak. Slowbro is honestly just broken in Gen 1 because of Amnesia and being a Psychic type, but its Water typing has assisted with it excelling as an excellent tank in future generations. Gen 2 would keep the steam rolling as it introduced quite a few bulky Water types in Suicune, Quagsire, Lantern, Slowking, and Kingdra, which is quite the accomplishment considering that most Gen 2 Pokemon are, really bad. And I mean like, really, really bad. But against all odds, the Water from Gen 2 is still better than Dasani or Aquafina. Not a high bar, but this is Gen 2 we're talking about. Gen 2 also majorly buffed one pre-existing Water type in Vaporeon, who along with the other evolutions gained the move Growth, the only move at the time that could boost special attack. When combined with Surf and Ice Beam, Vaporeon actually became one of the few Pokemon in Gen 2 who could actually deal damage. And, well, all the other Water types just stalled because that's what the Gen 2 meta was in a nutshell. Obviously, the other huge buff to Water in this gen came in the aforementioned rain weather condition. It wouldn't be the most popular move this gen, but definitely set the stage for generations to come. Gen 3 ended up being a bit of a mixed bag for Water types, as some old reliables gradually began to fall off, but at the same time, Swampert and Milotic joined the party in the top tier of competitive singles. Swampert being yet another fully evolved water ground type gave it superb defensive typing that allowed it to stand up to some of Gen 3 OU's biggest threats, notably including Tyranitar, Metagross, Aerodactyl, and even Salamence thanks to its access to Ice Beam. Swampert's only real kryptonite this gen aside from Celebi was ironically other bulky water types like Suicune and Milotic. Like I said at the beginning of this video, sometimes the worst thing about being a water type is just having to deal with other water types. In Generation 4, after surviving off of the Gen 1 classics of Surf and Hydro Pump for an entire decade, water types were finally blessed with a new tool, Aqua Jet, allowing slower water types to secure KOs in an increasingly fast metagame. And with the physical special split finally arriving, physically offensive water types like Gyarados and Azumarill can finally reach their true potential. While Azumarill was gifted with huge power in Gen 3, it wasn't until Gen 4 when this ability became truly useful, as there were no physical water moves prior to this generation. And between the combination of Dragon Dance and Waterfall now being a physical move, Gyarados was finally turned to the ferocious sweeper that it seemed like it was always destined to be since Gen 1. Kingdra also saw a return to dominance in this gen, solidifying itself as one of the scariest rain sweepers in the game, thanks to the deadly combination of Swift Swim, Draco Meteor, and occasionally Choice Specs. Empoleon also became one of the best leads in the game, as its move pool proved to be just as versatile as its incredible type combination. Empoleon was also a vital part of the team that won the very first World Championships in 2009, which, of course, happened to be a rain team. Using Ludicolo and Salamence as the primary rain dance setters, Kazuyuki Tsuji piloted this team to number 1. There's something beautiful about its simplicity. Using rain to boost Empoleon's damage, turn Ludicolo into a sweeper, negate Metagross's fire weakness, and restore Toxicroak's HP. You can clearly see all the puzzle pieces and how rain helps in so many different ways. And wouldn't you know it, a rain team also won the senior division that same year, with 4 of the 6 Pokemon being water types. And in 2010, both Worlds finalists utilized Kyogre in tandem with Swift Swim Ludicolo. So from the very inception of the VGC format, water was the type to beat. And hey, if you want to be the one to beat, then be sure to subscribe to the channel. A lot of my viewers aren't subscribed, and it would help me out a lot. It's free. In Gen 5, water types were blessed with yet another amazing buff that they really didn't need, Scald. Definitely the most influential water type move since Gen 1, Scald went to nearly every single water type in existence. And for losing just a touch of base power compared to Surf, they now had a 30% chance to burn anything in their path, which mattered a lot in Gen 5's Dragon Dance heavy singles meta. And this certainly made up for the fact that a lot of Gen 5's new water types didn't exactly have a huge impact on the game. Although a few new guys stuck out, like Jellicent, who, again, ironically enough, was one of the best Pokemon for shutting down offensive rain teams that dominated the Gen 5 meta, thanks to its access to Taunt, Will-O-Wisp, and Recover in tandem with its water absorbability, and Keldeo, who has just always been a fantastic special sweeper. But Gen 5 was much kinder to old water types, as Politoed experienced a meteoric rise as it gained Drizzle, making it the prime war criminal of the Gen 5 weather wars. And with the rain, Politoed brought all of its lackeys with it. Starmie, Tentacruel, Vaporeon, Gyarados, Gastrodon, and more. There was a literal flood of water types dominating the meta just because of Politoed getting Drizzle. And the crazy part is, Politoed ain't even that good! And then of course there was the Gen 5 lead to end all leads, Rotom Wash, who was good outside of rain support and Scald due to it only being weak to grass, having access to Volt Switch off the bat, and resisting many of Gen 5's biggest threats like Landorus, Therian, and Excadrill. In VGC, Water did see a regression this generation though, as weather teams ironically died out in favor of new Pokemon who were just incredibly strong on their own, like Amoonguss, Thundurus, Terrakion, and Conkeldurr. And despite the nerf to weather, Gen 6 singles more or less ended up being more of the same, except a lot less Politoed and a lot more of a different frog, Greninja. Honestly, I don't think Greninja being so good had to do so much with it being a water type though. I don't think that's too controversial of a take, seeing as how Greninja's main gimmick was just switching to other types that weren't water. Homeboy's just a broken mon, that's all there is to it. On the VGC side, Mega Gyarados proved to be an important addition to the game, as in 2014, Seijin Park used it to great effect to take home the World Championships, even if its efforts were largely overshadowed by a particular electric squirrel. And as soon as it looked like weather had finally fallen off for good in singles, Sun and Moon was like, hey, what if we made Politoed 2.0? But we made it good this time. And so Drizzle Pelipper was born. a Pokemon that has wreaked havoc on both singles and VGC since it got the ability. Which is a crazy statement to hear myself say out loud, because if somebody told me in 2014 that this goofy looking pelican with terrible stats would one day rule the meta, then I might not be here today. There's a good chance I would have died of laughter. Thankfully, nobody told me that, because nobody was insane enough to think that was even going to be a possibility. The period between Gen 6 and Gen 7 is also where a huge shift happened on the VGC side of the meta, as more often than not, restricted legendaries would now be allowed in a limited fashion, with one of the most popular ones almost every year being the Lord of the Seas itself, Kyogre. And really, most of the time, it's just for sheer damage output. Drizzle combined with your choice of Water Spout or Origin Pulse is enough on its own to deal serious damage to your opponent's team, and it's proven to be one of the most consistent staples of these restricted formats. And again, even when Kyogre isn't allowed in the format, Pelipper is still a good enough weather setter that it keeps rain teams afloat in nearly any format. It's also worth noting that Gen 7 gave water types Liquidation, a very powerful physical alternative to Waterfall, which hasn't been as widely available since HMs were phased out. I think Liquidation is actually a severely underappreciated move because people don't often think about how few good physical water moves there actually are. This single move keeps so many water types viable. Oh, and Gen 7 also gave us Toxapex. How could I forget? And in Generation 8, water types got yet another tool that, again, really wasn't needed. Flip Turn. Essentially being the slightly weaker water type equivalent of U-Turn. This gives slower water types so many options to safely pivot to another teammate, most notably Alomomola, Hisuian Samurott, and Swampert. Wave Crash was also introduced in the middle of the generation of Legends Arceus, so it wouldn't see any competitive usage until Gen 9, but being the water type equivalent of Flare Blitz has again been a massive buff for physical water types, even if there aren't that many of them around. Though, I guess on that note, Gen 8 also did give us Barraskewda and Dracovish, but they were just broken because they were broken. It didn't have a lot to do with being a water type. Gen 9 would further address that issue with the addition of one particularly game-breaking Pokemon, Palafin. Palafin Hero Form ended up being one of the very first competitive bans in Gen 9 due to its incredibly overwhelming stats. And with Terra Water Wave Crash and Jet Punch, it could easily KO most Pokemon before they even had a chance to fight back. But even post-Palafin ban, another water type quickly took over as a top contender this generation, Walking Wake. With its signature move Hydro Steam getting boosted damage in both the sun and the rain, Walking Wake is certainly one of the best Weather Team Pokemon in the game. And one of the best Paradoxes as well, which is certainly a high bar. It's actually pretty crazy just how good water still is in Gen 9, even with the large-scale removal of Scald. At first it wasn't in the game at all, and as of the DLC, it has only been brought back in a very limited capacity. This served to be a pretty massive nerf to water types across the board, and yet, the type is still incredibly powerful. Really, it's just a testament to how fundamentally good the type's core characteristics are. Type matchups are the most basic thing that any type has to offer, but water perhaps highlights their importance more than any other type. Aside from steel, that is. The fact that water can also be paired with any type in the game means that you can reliably build a team that consists of mostly water types, such as the all-too-common rain teams, and not share a lot of weaknesses. If you made a team consisting of Gyarados, Kingdra, Swampert, and Ogerpon Wellspring Mask, you could literally have 4 water types that don't share a single weakness. Well, you'd have to have a Pelipper too, so you would have a shared electric weakness, but nothing else. I said it earlier in the video, but really the biggest strength of water type is how crazily versatile it is. It pairs well with most type combinations. There's really not many types that get worse from being paired with water. It also tremendously helps that water has rain, which is arguably tied with sun in most generations as the best weather condition. I say most because Paradox Pokemon along with Torkoal and Koraidon have probably pushed sun over the edge in Gen 9, but even so, in Scarlet and Violet Regulation H, rain teams that centered around Pelipper, Archaludon, and Basculegion were among the most common and successful in the format. And because of this versatility, combined with all the amazing moves this type has access to, like Surf, Scald, Muddy Water in VGC, Flip Turn, Aqua Jet, and more, water types will always have the tools to be top tier threats. Even some of the very worst water types that you can think of probably have some redeeming factors because of these tools. Well, maybe not Corsola or Love Disc, I don't think there's any saving those two. And with all of these factors considered, even at its very worst, I don't think water has ever been below a top 4 type in the game. Most of the time, I would venture to say it's actually in the top 3 or even top 2. And this is despite numerous attempts by Game Freak to nerf the water type. such as severely limiting Scald and nerfing weather setting abilities, inventing Freeze Dry as a weakness, inventing Salt Cure as a move. They have definitely tried to bring this type down a few notches in recent years, and for the most part, water has come out smelling like a rose. And so that is the entire history of one of Pokemon's greatest types, the Water type. Be sure to like this video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more videos just like this one, and I'll see you guys next time.